Let's talk about The Law by Frederic Bastiat. People leave comments recommending books. I read those books. This time I'm going to try to make this into as many videos as I possibly can. And so we'll just start with some basics. The roots of the law, according to Bastiat, is we create law as a check against avarice or extreme greed or someone taking from others. We've created a law to prevent others from taking life, liberty, or property from others, but that's actually not what's happening in 1850 as Bastiat's writing this, and it's not what happens today. The law does not really exist as a check against avarice. It's more of a tool for avarice. The law is used to take from others, to take life, liberty, property from others, to enrich other individuals. So we got to go back. Let's lay down some presuppositions, some a priori knowledge, and the idea of life, liberty, and property. We are born with the right to live. No one can take your life away from you. No one has the right to take your liberties, your freedoms, your rights away from you. And no one has the right to take your property. Your property is yours. No one else can take your property from you, and you cannot take anyone else's property from you. Now, this was not established by law. This was not established by the government of men. Before law existed, before governments existed, before we could even write words and form sentences, men agreed that no one can take your life from you. It is your life. No one can take your freedoms and liberties from you, and no one could take your property. It's mine, not yours, and yours is yours and not mine. And then eventually we kind of codify that. We take this idea that we all agree upon. Eventually, governments of men were formed, laws are written based around this basic God-given right to live, and no one can take your life, and God-given right to freedom and liberty, and then also that your property is yours. This is caveman stuff. Eventually, the cavemen are writing it down and saying, all right, well, here are the rules that we already knew. Let's just write them down. Not created by governments. Big point. All right, let's go back even further. Let's continue to lay down some presuppositions. You as an individual have the right to live, always have. All individuals have the right to live. No one can take your life from you. No one can kill you, murder you. No one can take away your freedoms, your rights. No one also can take away your stuff. It's yours, and it works vice versa. You can't take others' lives. You can't take others' freedoms and rights, and you can't take others' stuff. And if someone tries to take your life or usurp your freedoms or take your life, you have the right to defend it. We can all agree with this presupposition that if someone attempts to take away your life, you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to defend your property from being taken from you. You have the right, as an individual, to defend your freedoms. We all agree, okay? Right, let's start from there. We get it. We all have the right, and then we have the right to life, liberty, and property, and then we have the right to protect those from being stolen from us. Everyone can agree upon that, and you can use force to protect your life. If someone is going to kill you, you don't just let them kill you. I mean, maybe you do, but you definitely have the right, and we can all agree that if someone is going to murder you, you have the right to at least try not to get murdered and use force in the process. If someone's trying to steal your stuff, you have the right to use force to protect your stuff. Now, let's take it a step further. If the individual has the right to use force to protect his or her life, liberty, or property, then a collection of individuals can collectively work together to protect their life, liberty, and property. If one can, in defense, protect life, liberty, and property from intruders, invaders, murderers, bandits, thieves, robbers, if one can do it, then the collective can protect their collective lives against murderers, bandits, thieves, an army of henchmen. That's not a giant leap, right? If one has the right to use defensive force to protect life, liberty, and property, which we all agree they have, then a collection can do it as well. Remember, keyword here is defense, defense, defense. You are defending your property. You cannot take from others. And that's what we're saying. You can defend it because the rule is they can't take from you, so you have the right to defend your property. So really what we have with collective force in defense is simply just an extension or an outgrowth of individual force, which is the result of us all agreeing that we all have the right to live. We all have the right to protect our life if it's taken from us, and then a collection of us can protect our lives. So I have the right, I can protect that right. we have the right and we can protect the right. Protection, defense. Those are the key words. Protection, defense. This is going to be the basis of law. This is the root of law. Now, offense is a different story. You do not have the right to use individual force against another. In this example, you would be the crook, the criminal, stealing. You're taking someone's life. You're taking someone's property. You're taking someone's rights. This person actually would have the right to defend themselves against you, but we do not have an individual use of force on the offensive. That being the case, then the collective, based on the individual, then wouldn't have the ability to collectively use offensive force against an individual either. Individual defensive force, yes. Collective defensive force, yes, because we're protecting life, liberty, and property. But in these cases, you are taking someone's life, liberty, and property individually and now the collectively. So that's not good. And when we break it down, remember, the only reason we got to this conversation, got to this point, was because it was all about protecting individual rights, protecting individual lives, protecting individual property. Well, in this case, you are taking the individual's life. You are taking their property. You are taking their rights. This is a complete contradiction to the root of law. The root of law was that the individual can protect their property. Well, you are violating rule number one, which is to protect your own property. So offensive force, not cool. So going back to the defense, let's talk about the individual. So individual defense, cool. Collective defense, cool. This is going to be the root of law according to Bastiat. Let's break it down again. So we're talking about force. When can you use force to protect your life, liberty, and property as an individual? We all agree upon that. We took it a step further and said, you know what? The collective can work together as well if they are protecting the life, liberty, and property of the collection of people defensively. Now, we take it a step further. So we took it from the individual. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we get it. All right, yeah, the collective, the group can do it as well. Well, the third step then is just simply to codify it into law and to write law that recognizes that we have the right to life, liberty, and property. You have the right to protect the life, liberty, and property, and that the collective has the right to life, liberty, and property, and the collective can work together to protect life, liberty, and property, and we write it down in laws and in constitution. And that is all that law is. Law is simply and was and is and should be, too bad it isn't, hasn't been, and never will be, a system of defense. The reason we create law is to protect life, liberty, and property. John Locke, we create governments to protect our life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson, we create a constitution to protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's why we codified in law. That's why we have written governments and governments of men for that one purpose. That is the root cause. Unfortunately, we today, and even as Bastiat was talking about then, we think that, we use laws to give out free stuff. We give out laws to do all kinds of... No, the reason that men write laws is simply to protect life, liberty, and property. End of day, let's go home. The government shows up to work. It's 9 a.m. Hey, what are we supposed to do today? Well, we need to write a law that says we're going to protect your life, liberty, and property. Done. 9:05. Can we go home? Hey, what about if we write a law that gives money to... No, shut up. Get out of here. There's only one rule for us to create this law, and it is simply to protect your life, liberty, and property. We got no other business doing anything else. And once we start to get into the other stuff, we're going to start violating people's life, liberty, and property. When we step one step further, if we write one more law, if we go with two more sentences, we are going to start to intrude on people's life, liberty, and property. We'll just stop right here. We're going to protect life, liberty, and property. We're not going to do any more. If we start adding stuff, then most assuredly, we are going to violate someone's life. We're definitely going to violate the property of other people, and we're going to violate their freedoms as well. So collective force is okay. We agree. Collective force, protect our life, liberty, and property, and we put that in the laws. And the root of all this was just the individual idea that, hey, we have the right. You have the right. I have the right. Cavemen had the right to live. No one could take away your soul, your beating heart. No one could take away your freedoms, your liberties. Those are yours. Those are unique to you, and no one can shut you up, take those away from you, take away whatever it is that it means to be a human being. And then 3, no one can take your stuff. That's your stuff. This is my stuff. Leave each other alone. No one takes property from other people. And then we took the next step, said you got the right to protect that. The collective has the right to protect that. Let's put it in the laws. There it is. That's law. That's where it's supposed to stop. Unfortunately, we go off the deep end like we always do. And let's go off the deep end. Now, some of you are like, I don't know, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Well, let's make a big deal out of something, because you're thinking about, oh, well, yeah, of course it makes sense to protect ourselves from crooks and robbers and thieves. Of course you should have the right to protect yourself from this guy as well. Well, this guy may not necessarily knock down your door with a no-knock raid and murder you, although it does seem to happen. That might be an exaggeration. That might be an outlier. But this individual definitely will take your rights. This government will take your freedoms and your property. Maybe not going to take your life, although in some cases the government does take your life without due process. But the government has absolutely guaranteed 100% for every single person watching this video taken some of your rights, has taken some of your freedoms, and has taken some of your property. And that violates the basic foundation of the law. The basic foundation, according to Bastiat, which we laid down at the beginning of this, was the government is supposed to be a check against avarice. The government is supposed to protect us, not take away, not take our property. And let's focus on property. So we start with law. Where did law come from? Law came from the idea that we as a collective could use force to protect from criminals, crooks, thieves, robbers. And that comes from the individual being allowed to protect from criminals, crooks, thieves, robbers. That's how we got to law. Law is simply a check to protect our individual rights. We created the government to protect our individual rights, not take away individual rights of who we feel appropriate, not to take away the individual property of that guy or those guys or this group or that group. It's not supposed to be a tool for avarice. It's supposed to be a check against that. It's supposed to be preventative. It's supposed to punish these types of behaviors. Instead, it is now these types of behaviors. The criminals use the law to take your property. The government writes law that takes your property, that takes rights from you, that takes freedoms from you. The reason, rolling it back to why did we create law in the first place, from the cavemen to the collective, we created law as a recognition of our rights and our need to protect our rights, our life, and our liberty. Somehow, along the way, it's turned into, we wrote this thing to protect us, to we wrote this thing to take from some people. And when you're taking from some people, those some people you are taking life, liberty, property from, well, you clearly are not protecting them. You're clearly not using it as a check against greed and an extreme desire for power. We do not have a government that writes laws that protects us. We are so far from that. We were so far from that 200 years ago. We were so far from that in 1850 when Bastiat is writing this. And he realizes that if we could just go back to where we have a simple free society where the law is simply designed to protect people, we aren't going to have any problems. So you go to the roots of law. Remember, it was supposed to be a check against avarice, which would be extreme greed or this desire to will over people and have power over people. The law is supposed to prevent that from happening. The law is supposed to protect individual rights and collective rights. The law was supposed to protect our individual liberty and thus our collective liberty, and then our individual property and our collective property. But that's not what happened. What happened is the laws that created today and every day. When was the last time you saw a law that was designed simply just to protect something, as opposed to the laws that are written every single day that are to take from one group and give to another, or take from one group and give to the government, violate your rights, benefit your rights, violate your property, benefit this property. Every law that is created in one way, shape, or form seems to violate a right of one group or another, to violate the freedoms of one group or another, to violate the lives of one group or another, or to violate the property of one group or another. If we force governments to follow this basic idea of law, then there's very few laws that they could write, which is excellent, which is wonderful, which is what we would like for them to do. A simple way to prevent governments from overstepping is to make them follow the basic idea of law, which then really inhibits any potential to make laws, which is wonderful because the only laws that we need are laws that protect life, liberty, and property. And if a law violates any of this, then it shouldn't exist. And so in the next coming videos, we find out what really law is. Law isn't a check against avarice. It is a tool for avarice, and it's also a tool for false philanthropy. And we'll go over those in upcoming videos here at the Constrained Vision. So, and you know it's true. People use the law for their own personal gain, and they also use the law for false philanthropy, which you can figure out in the video. So thanks for joining me at the Constrained Vision. Like, subscribe, share the videos, leave a comment, recommend a book. I'll try to get some more Bastiat coming at you soon.